Well, I'm going to go ahead and do my spiel. We've got about 40 people in the audience. Thank you for coming. It's glitch technology always happens. I'm Joe Arredondo. I'm the Director of Landmark Arts. I run the exhibits programs, speaker programs for the School of Art. And thank you for joining us for our first in our Race and Social Justice in the Arts Speaker Series. We have a panel discussion today. We're really looking forward to it. We have a good audience. And so this program is funded with support from a grant from the Helen Jones Foundation, and then cultural activities fees, which are given to us by the college, JT and Margaret Talkington College of Visual and Performing Arts. And we have quite a few speakers coming up for the rest of the semester, pretty much every Friday or most every Friday for the rest of the semester. And then you can find those on our speakers page of the School of Art website, www.landmarkarts.org will take you to our Landmark Arts pages, and then you can click on speakers. We have, and Sang-Mi is going to talk about a workshop related to this presentation. So I'm going to hand it over to Sang-Mi, and I'm going to share my screen so that she can talk. Sang-Mi, are you ready for me to do that?
Yes. Sorry about the whole hassle. It's giving a heart attack. Okay. All right, let me get started. So are you sharing my screen?
I'm seeing your screen. Can anybody else see the screen? Raise your hands, panelists, if you can see the screen. Good. Excellent.
Excellent. Thank you
and
so
just
much.
Tell me when to move forward, Sang-Mi.
Okay. So that's the screen that I'm sharing, or is that the screen you're sharing?
This is the screen I'm sharing.
Okay. Can you unshare so I can open my screen?
Oh, you're going to share your screen now?
Yes. Okay.
Okay, good.
All right, because it has some updated information. All right, we are here. Okay, so thank you all for coming. This is a wonderful, exciting moment to introduce these three panelists of the Murphy Prize, Shinya Kim and Daniel Demetria East. So I'm the moderator and organizing of the panel. This panel will talk about the intersections of Althea Murphy Prize, artistic practice, racial disparities in pain communication, and healing through community art activities. So before their panel presentation, I wanted to introduce some kind of umbrella topic. So I was brought up in South Korea, and my first English conversation exposure was through, "Hello, how are you? I'm fine, thanks." So that, no matter how you feel, you're saying, "I'm fine, thanks," it became a polite way of introducing yourself to others in greetings. So I always thought that was strange. Then this semester, in my beginning printmaking class, I asked my students some memes or phrases as an epitome of today's society and put on board by students. So the one selected at this time was this famous meme by Mr. Green that was part of this webcomic series Gun Show in 2013. So we are kind of contemplating the idea about how oblivious we are as Americans living in this pandemic situation, but still believe everything is going to be fine. And after this selection, one of our graduate students, Justice Borozek, revised this design and appropriated with the toilet paper. So we burned the screen out of this image and screen printed on t-shirts. So everybody took part of printing on both t-shirts and paper, and they took home and wearing it, hopefully. So we can kind of understand the situations going on in the United States. So students at the time pointed out such oblivions pervasive in today's society, even before the pandemic, thinking everything will be all right, even if they are hurt and going through pain. So when inviting visiting artist Althea Murphy Prize and learning more about her work, the connection between social pressure for expectations and racial distress, mental and physical pain caused by these, and how to overcome with the power of community came together as a main topic of today's panel discussion. So inspired by social implication of beauty and its relationship to female identity, women, and culture, Althea Murphy Price has been using hair as a powerful symbol to address women in Black culture. And she's gonna talk more about her topics of real and false decoration and imitation. Those things are explored in 2 or 3-dimensional working methods using traditional and non-traditional approaches in printmaking and sculpture. In this discussion, Dr. Shinya Kim, and Daniel East will talk about society's pressure, mental illness, physical pain in minority populations, and how the self-care components in art and the community counseling can facilitate communications for healing and wellness of members of minority communities. So with that being said, let me introduce individual panelists. So we are gonna have presentations and panel discussion on topics and Q&A open to you. So feel free to fill in the Q&A box. You can do it ahead of time or later once you get some ideas. Okay, let me see. So Althea Murphy Price. Althea Murphy Price is a professional artist and printmaker living in Knoxville, Tennessee. As an artist, her work has been recognized for its non-conventional approaches to traditions of printing. Murphy Price began her studies in fine art at Spelman College before receiving her Master of Arts in printmaking and painting from Purdue University, and later studying at the Tyler School of Art at Temple University, where she earned her Master of Fine Arts. Murphy Price maintains an active exhibiting practice. She has exhibited in venues throughout the country and abroad, such as the Weston Gallery in Cincinnati, Ohio, Howard Museum of Art in Baltimore, Maryland, Wellesley College in Boston, Massachusetts, Wade Wilson Art Gallery, Houston, Indiana University Art Museum, the Print Center, Philadelphia, the Hersey Institute of Contemporary Art in Charleston, South Carolina, the Knoxville Museum of Art, Knoxville, Tennessee. International exhibitions include exhibits in Jingdezhen, China, Shanghai, China, Tokyo, Japan, Tidaholm, Sweden. In addition to her exhibition record, she has been an artist in residence at the Frank Lloyd Wright School, University of Hawaii, Hilo, the Vermont Studio Center, and the Venice Printmaking Studio. Her writings and work have been featured in such publications as Art Papers Magazine, CAA Reviews, Contemporary Impressions Journal, Art in Print, Printmaking, A Complete Guide to Materials and Process, and Printmakers Today. Her work will be also on display at the School of Art Folio Gallery. Next speaker is Shinya Kim, a PhD licensed psychologist, completed her doctoral training in counseling psychology at the University of Wisconsin, Milwaukee, with a minor in educational statistics and measurement. Prior, she completed master's degree in prevention science and practice at Harvard University, and predoctoral internship at the Kings County Hospital Center in Brooklyn, New York. She is a licensed psychologist and an assistant professor in the TTU Department of Psychological Sciences. Shinya's primary research focuses on how culture, language, and social norms influence the pain experience and opioid use. This work has appeared in several major behavioral health journals and international conferences with the aim of alleviating health disparities in pain care. She has 10 years of clinical experience in behavioral medicine and pain psychology training across a variety of healthcare settings in Massachusetts, Wisconsin, New York, and Texas. Most recently, she received an NSF grant to develop a digital health technology that helps pain communication among racially and linguistically diverse pain patients. The third speaker and last, Daniel Demetria East. She is an interdisciplinary artist, poet, and community organizer. She creates work that explores the complexities of Black femme identity through trials of pain and healing processes. She creates her work using found objects and African American vernacular English. He spends time researching the effects of the arts on marginalized individuals through community-based art initiatives. East currently lives in Lubbock, Texas, where she's one of the 4 artists in residence at the Charles Adams Studio Project and the founder and director of well-known East Lubbock Art House. She's originally from LaGrange, Texas, and is a recent graduate of the University of Mary Hardin Baylor, where she received her Bachelor of Fine Arts degree in Studio Arts. While being an active member in the arts community and holding various positions in many nonprofit boards, East has participated in many events such as monthly First Friday Art Trails, curated the current exhibition at 5NJ Gallery, the Black Women's Epoch, and has participated in the Texas Tech University School of Arts Race and Social Justice series, where she presented the virtual talk, Why East Lubbock Matters, Art and Activism in a Segregated City. So we have this ongoing series that started last fall. She also co-hosted the Lubbock Juneteenth 2020 celebration after it was canceled due to COVID-19 and has assisted in many community projects and art initiatives. So before we start the panel presentation from Althea, Shinye, and Daniel, I just wanted to introduce Althea Murphy-Price and Daniel East are hosting a workshop on Sunday, March 28th from 1 to 4 p.m. And we have a Zoom meeting link on the School of Art website. So please go ahead and register for the workshop. And the seating is limited up to 25 registrants. So please hurry to have a spot, and some supplies are provided for local participants. And if they're out of towners, we'll ship them out for their participation. So this is a wonderful opportunity I wanted to advertise. So that being said, let's go back to Althea Murphy-Price. I'll unshare my screen and she'll start her presentation.
Hi, just 1 minute. Okay. Can you see me? It's odd because I can't see anything, so I want to make sure. Okay.
We're seeing you, but not your PowerPoint yet.
Okay, great. Yes. Well, I didn't intend for it, but we'll start off with the first slide. Thank you, Seungmi, for the great introduction. Thank you, Joe, for your help in assisting and organizing this. I'm really dearly touched to participate in this. This is new for me, to be able to talk specifically to the topic of race, pain, and wellness is wonderful, and it's really exciting way for me approach to talk about my work, since it's something that I think about so heavily. Also, the workshop is also a really is going to be a great opportunity to approach talking about this work within in a different, not just a different context, but a different medium as well, working through hair. So just to begin, I'm going to try to watch my time. But I want to begin by saying and clarifying that that what I want to talk about today, it's important to say that I'm not an expert in mental health and wellness. I've taken some sociology classes, but my experience in terms of research is limited in that regard. But what I want to talk about and wish to share comes from a place of personal experience. And I'm an artist first and foremost, and I find inspiration in what I see throughout my life and through my perspective. And I'm also a Black woman. So adversely, what I am inspired by equally represents my identity as someone who is American, Black, and female. I believe my role as an artist is to be an observer. And so while I don't consider my artwork political, it just so happens that politics surround my identity. So I want to begin by sharing some of the motivations and intentions behind my work. Within this framework of the panel's topic, I address the subject of pain and wellness as predicated by socialization, which is how we exist in the world, how we engage with others, and how they engage with us. And my work has long been inspired by how race and feminine identity have been constructed socially, historically, in fact, affecting those that do not fit within the social norms to negatively internalize their own self-perception. It was images like these images I have here from magazines such as Ebony and Essence, as early as the 1800s, as later as the 1920s, that became some of my first points of inspiration. If you read the advertisements, you see they are not advertising a product as much as it is advertising facial features, hair textures. These are things that are predetermined by genetics and not by the success of a product. They are advertising modes of acceptance. They offer judgment, they communicate preference, and for Black women, which these were intended to market to, it teaches self-hatred. Men prefer beauty. Clothes, talent, and personality play their part, but all else being equal, men prefer beauty. The subtle, intriguing finesse of skin and hair. You too can know the joy of being a preferred person, an utterly loving creature. Or this other one here, Black skin remover, a before and after, a wonderful face bleach and hair straightener, a peach-like complexion obtained if used directly. I like this instructions here that while skin of Black or brown person will lighten 4 shades lighter, and a mulatto person perfectly white. So when looking at advertisements like this, it helps to contextualize the long-term influences that still are existent in our propaganda today, and which have left this legacy of stress and shame for many marginalized groups. Even today, we find these forms of advertisements, and these advertisements we can see today favor one look over another, or one identity over another. Even the advertisements that attempt to communicate a positive message at times only exploit their subjects, exploit these characteristics of brown skin, kinky hair, full lips. These subjects are often represented as exotic or hypersexual. So I wanted to share.
Oh, okay. So
yeah.
Are you going to share the PowerPoint?
Can you not see it?
No, you haven't started yet.
Oh.
I thought you were going to speak something, then.
That was bizarre. Oh, I'm very sorry. That's funny. I cannot see anything. I was concerned about, okay. Oh, I'm very sorry, everyone. Here we go. Okay, so I'm referring to something that you cannot see. Gosh, thank you for saying something.
Okay.
That is much better.
Yes.
That's much better. Okay, okay. So I was referring to these advertisements here. I'll just backtrack really quickly. These are advertisements, and these are advertisements that I started with in my graduate study at Tyler School of Art, and I found these in the archives and photographed several of them, and they've still become point of reference for me today. So when you're looking at, so these are 2 digital prints that I created from packaging of recent hair products from while I was participating in the Frogman's print workshop, which is now in Council Bluffs, Iowa. And these are digital prints, but I did not alter any of the graphic information. These are just the labeling. So this is called Miss Black Yaki. And this one here is the Silky Jumbo Do Me brand. And it's from this state of mind that my work is created. It has been since seeing these advertisements while I was in graduate study that's created this interest in questioning the role that beauty concepts, materials, and products have in influencing or even distorting our self-perception. Okay. So I began this project a few years ago, and in search of inspiration, I Googled the words perfect hair. I was surprised to discover a variety of images, primarily women, but also homogeneous in their hair texture, skin color, and features, like that. And I used this inspiration for these to create this body of these very colorful imaged prints. Working in this way, based on these online search results, almost by osmosis, I responded to the popularity of hair, of color dyeing in hair, which is a current trend. And these bright colors, almost fantastical colors, began guiding much of my formal choices and took on this metaphorical significance. I believe that few Black women would argue that the subject of hair is complex. It is equally layered, problematic, celebrated, but these images that I was creating and inspired by were not images of Black or African-American hair, but rather created in response to looking at these hair advertisements used to attract the appearance of the majority. And what you must understand about this is that I did this not out of anger or frustration, but in response to my own subconscious thinking, which I quickly became aware that I found these images desirable, attractive, in fact, almost envious over. And despite this, they don't represent images of myself. So you see, what I'm arguing is that the social constructs of beauty for women have long taught women that don't fit into these ideals to desire after them, to even seek for them, and be willing to even pay for them as well. Within the context of this panel discussion, it is this state of mind that has produced this chronic state of stress in the subconscious of all women, and often uniquely for Black women. While I work in a number of ways, primarily in printmaking, and these are all lithographs, I find really great significance in working methods. So I intend to share a lot of this information with you today on my methods. And through the process of print, what I find meaning in is the notion of deception, this idea of the real versus the false, or is it interchangeable identity? Prints are traditionally made from what is referred to as a matrix. And you can see here, I am leaning over a lithographic press bed and a photolithographic plate. And from this matrix or this plate, these copies are made. This means inherent in the process itself is the duality or a mirroring metaphor in which the image is just merely a replication. In my process, I use, and so here we go, you can see here. So this plate is, I use the hair to draw with, and it's being rolled up here. So that's the finalized print. In my process, I use hair as a drawing tool. As an object itself, I'm able to capture the nearly exact copy of the image using a photographic process. So here I am arranging hair onto hair fibers to compose for a future print, which is oddly a familiar experience. What I could best describe as akin to running fingers through someone else's hair or rummaging through someone else's things. It feels familiar in its own relationship to one's body, but it's also incidental. And being that we know that it's this inanimate object or existence. So most often I use synthetic hair, and get the next slide here. This is synthetic hair, and most often I use this to create work since I find it has so many metaphors in its own deceptive nature. The beauty industry has long cornered that market of deception. We buy products, materials, tools to make improvements to our appearance so often that these are falsehoods, which leads me to ask, what does this need to say, what does this need to deceive say about our inner perceptions of ourselves? Is it a negative place to be, or is it a mode of escapism? A hidden desire to exist in the fantasy, and possibly the only place we can find comfort and self-acceptance. For some time now, I've been creating these installed pieces using hair clippings, which are dusted through lace patterns in the arrangement of a rug on the floor. And these hair rugs are not affixed to the ground, which means they can be altered or tampered with by its environment or the viewers. They too respond to the world around them, since they are made of stencils that are also copies, and the hair clippings conform to the arrangement that the lace creates for them. This piece, in her place, the lace arrangements are made on both pedestal that extends onto the floor. So once on the floor, the clippings become this remnant or discarded again. They're devalued or de-elevated from their original art object status on the pedestal. And they are now even more vulnerable as they exist on the floor. And it's this vulnerability that I find relevant with in this work to the topics of our panel's theme on pain. This communicating vulnerability or being in this fragile state, much like the practice of creating a Tibetan sand mandala. Installing these pieces takes a considerable amount of focus and time, and yet it's so easily destroyed. I've also created these pieces using sugar, and I find sugar as well as a symbol for desire and attraction. So, and you can see here, this is like rainbow sprinkle, like glitter, and introduces the color of pink. So I want to finish by sharing with you some of my most recent work, which is sculpture and photograph. And for the past two years or so, I've been collecting hair ties, balls, clips, barrettes. I call them boggles, using them to make sculptural objects. And I have made these into forms of two-dimensional prints like this one. And some of these are on display in the Folio Gallery. But I've also used these to make or build wearable headwear as well. And most recently, I've begun using 3D printing as well to create accessories, tools, and toys. So I began doing this with one thought in mind: how and at what point do we become self-critical? How early do these racial stressors become obstacles of self-value? In 2010, the popular hashtag Black Girl Magic became widely known and used in the Black community, particularly to promote and celebrate the achievements of Black women. For example, Simone Biles wins the 30th Olympic or world champion medal. Hashtag Black Girl Magic. Michelle Obama is inducted into the National Women's Hall of Fame. Hashtag Black Girl Magic. Oprah Winfrey, Black Girl Magic. Beyonce, Black Girl Magic. Amanda Gorman, the recent inaugural poet, Black Girl Magic. It was quickly popularized by Cassandra Thomas and quickly caught on as a movement in itself. And it's true, we as Black women need encouragement. Black women are disproportionately at higher risk for a myriad of health problems, including depression, hypertension, diabetes, and are 3 out of 4 times more likely to die from pregnancy-related complications than their female white counterparts. So I created this work in response to the Black Girl Magic movement, which is a series of photographs of young girls wearing these headdresses and doing this with a critical gaze to consider the consequences of assuming high expectations and excellence. The headwear they are wearing is intended to be dazzling, it's intended to be youthful, playful, but it's also excessive. It's also heavy. And it's the consequence of expected excellence, or excuse me, the consequence of expected excellence is denied basic normality. Recently, I've also been using these 3D printed forms as hair accessories to create a set of additional photographic images. And this piece entitled Blackbird Girl, the words of Nina Simone's song, For Women, comes to mind, which in it says, "My skin is black, my arms are long, my hair is woolly, my back is strong, strong enough to take the pain, afflicted again and again, what do you call me?" In these works, each object takes on, these 3-dimensional printed objects take on different meanings, involving ideas of both flight, noise, and growth. Now, lastly, I would like to share a piece that is currently on display at the Huntsville Museum of Art, and it's entitled Counter. It's a collection of tools for protection, for building, and for self-care, as well as for growth. It's a counter for exchange, and it's also a fertile ground for tilling, for changing. And that's all I have for you. Thank you.
Thank you, Althea. So Xinye, can I share the PowerPoint on my end? Can I hear from you?
Yeah, I will share mine. I think it worked before.
Okay, great.
We'll see.
I can see it, yes.
All right. Okay, let me start. Okay. Hello, everyone. So I am, I'm Xinye Kim. I'm an assistant professor in counseling psychology at Texas Tech. My interest in pain, maybe pain is a little, some people might think of like pain is like, oh, why psychologists is doing pain? Like, aren't you guys doing like psychological distress or emotional distress? I was thinking that way when I was in grad school, and this, I feel like really pain psychology really found me. So my interest in this area was really truly inspired by my clinical experience in health psychology during my doctorate. Prior to this, my idea of pain was very confined to the physical realm. So as these 2 pictures of mind and body illustrate, for a long time, people had very dualistic perspective in pain. So as you see from the right picture here, in the 16th century, as Descartes illustrated, many people believed that the body was more similar to like a machine, and that there is this very clear cause and effect from a bottom-up approach. So there is something that you hurt, and then your brain picks that up. Of course, in theory, I believed in mind-body connection, but not really on a deeper level. Then, by working with patients and their families and seeing how powerful psychological interventions are for those with chronic pain, I was amazed by the deep connection between mind and body. So from that point on, pain was never again just physical. I came to understand pain as something that's physical, social, psychological, and cultural. All of these elements impact patients' lives and lives of those around them. So your pain not only affects you, but affects your family, friends, your work, your community, and our society. So the paradigms have changed. So traditionally, as I just said, people believe that pain only has this ascending information, which is very bottom up. Now, many empirical studies have confirmed that not only does this ascending bottom up information exist, but there is this top down modulation where brain can actually modulate the pain experience that you have and pain that you perceive. And these yellow highlighted factors play such critical roles in that pain modulation. So, and as you see, culture plays this huge role in how people perceive, experience, and communicate pain. So now you see why psychology is so important in pain, and the role of psychologists in healthcare is just tremendous. As you see, many brain studies revealed that the area that's activated by physical pain is a very similar area that is activated by social and emotional pain. So social pain includes like rejection, racism. Emotional pain could be depression, anxiety, trauma. And because of that, a lot of doctors these days actually prescribe antidepressant to people with chronic pain because they share the same nerve path of physical and emotional pain. A study I'm currently conducting, for example, is to examine the intersection of pain injustice and racial injustice. Pain injustice is this construct to describe prevalent appraisal that pain patients engage in, such as like, why me? It's so unfair. Like my life is never the same. So what we found is that the patterns of pain injustice and racial injustice are very much similar in that the more racial injustice you believe you experience, the more pain injustice you perceive. So they are very intertwined. Some of you might have seen this story in the news 2 months ago. A Black physician in Indiana, Dr. Susan Moore, requested pain medication, and her white doctor downplayed her concerns and suggested she should just be discharged. Something went really wrong. So what do we know about the broader factors at this intersection of race, culture, and pain? There is this reality of socio-cultural climate with racism that seriously impacts people's health and well-being. So what we know in this area is that racial and ethnic minority pain patients are less frequently treated in pain clinics and hospitals care than whites, less likely than whites patients to receive any pain medication, and they are more likely to receive lower doses of pain medication, and they're more likely to have longer wait times to receive pain medication in the emergency department, and thus they are less likely to receive opioids as treatment of pain despite higher pain scores. So in essence, chronic pain affects racial and ethnic minorities at disproportionate rates, with them reporting greater pain severity and pain-related disability, and yet they do not get the same or better or even like similar level of care that other people have. So scholars in psychology have identified many mechanisms in which racial pain health disparities occur. These include provider stereotypes, provider affect, empathy, patient socioeconomic status, patient pain coping, and patient mistrust of medicine. And they also identified provider-patient communication and patient pain reporting are the key mechanism in which pain health disparities occur. And these two are the current focus of my work. So I talked a lot about my research. I will briefly discuss a clinical case that I had many years ago. I once treated a 48 years old African-American female referred by her neurologist, diagnosed with PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, and major depressive disorder. I will call her as Nina. She was also experiencing chronic pain from medically unexplained neurological issues. So in the initial psychotherapeutic phase, I carefully followed her affect. When discussing her pain, she oscillated between being tearful and dissociative. So I came to understand that she had very little tolerance for the powerful emotions stemming from her pain. She had a pattern of consistently seeking medical remedies in the hopes that doctors could fix her problem rather than examining the sources of her emotional pain. So by providing a consistent, non-judgmental environment where she viewed me as a safe object who could tolerate listening to her suffering, she was eventually able to explore her emotional trauma that had resulted from previous sexual abuse and her ambivalent feelings towards it. Her invisible trauma and chronic pain mirrored mirrored her experience as a lighter colored skinned African American, since her father was Black and her mother was mixed racial. A cultural identity that often went unacknowledged by people around her because of her lighter skin compared to other Black people. And at the same time, it was something with which she strongly identified. So as we processed her invisible otherness, she was particularly touched and came to stop seeing the world based on pain, which had been a central aspect of her life. So her improvement, at least in part, was achieved through my therapeutic reflection of her transference feelings towards me. My own sense of otherness as a foreign national therapist helped emphasize with her feelings that were difficult to integrate into her life. So equipped with these powerful insights, I followed with other techniques such as mindfulness and behavioral that helped her structure a life in which pain was not the central and ongoing dynamic in her life anymore. So over the course of 6 months of weekly therapy, she made profound changes in her relationship with herself, others, and her pain. So just brief take-home message. I think throughout my educational and professional development, I sought to improve my understanding of feelings of otherness in the context of psychological and physical pain. And people, including myself, psychologists, they work with clients in a variety of settings, representing a broad range of cultures, ethnicities, and other social contexts, from inpatient to outpatient, psychological adjustment challenges to serious mental health issues, and temporary to chronic and terminal illness. And what I found was that there is this common theme woven throughout. Clients often feel like they are outsiders as they attempt to establish a sense of self in a very difficult and unfamiliar environment. They carry something that sets them apart and want to communicate their challenges in an environment of compassion and understanding. So psychologists help clients work through these feelings by means of contact with their alienated selves to form authentic relationships with the people in their lives. And this creates new identities where the pain stemming from their feelings of otherness becomes the powerful empathy and understanding that I have found in my own journey. And I believe that that art, which historically has been such a powerful catalyst for communication and understanding for marginalized and underrepresented populations, has such a profound potential to play a role in healing. I truly think that art can form a pathway to deep empathy through both the understanding of oneself and the offering of an artistic medium through which the community can begin to understand the artist. I'm very excited to pass the baton to Danielle and see what she has to add to our conversation.
Wonderful, thank you so much. So baton is given to Daniel now.
Awesome. Okay, let me get my screen shared and we'll get started. So I'm said I'm no expert. I'm actually probably the worst person to talk about for healing, but a lot of my work deals with healing. I really got interested in the idea and the ideology when I was like in my junior year of college at UMHB. So I was working on my senior project, and I was also just kind of working through like what I wanted my art to be more, because I had really focused on, you know, Blackness and what that meant as a Black woman. And so I also just kind of wanted to focus on like what was the intersection where most Black people, most Black women and non-binary people connected, and like where was there a space where we could all just like come together? What was something that we all really focused on and what we all needed? And I was going back and listening to Beyonce's album and her visual album, Lemonade. And so I kind of was more focusing not on so much the music, but the visual aspect and also what each song meant and represented. And so with each song she had done, it was also inspired by another poet, but it was, in a sense, each song represented a different step. Some represented revenge, some represented healing, some represented renewal. And so if you watch all the videos in order how she has it, it goes through where she focuses on pain, and then where it goes through healing, where she essentially turns lemons into lemonade. So that's really a big focus and what I was really inspired by with my work. And also her sister, Solange. Both of them are really big inspiration in what I do, and also to focus on some authors that also really represent what my work really means is also Audre Lorde. So I've been really focusing on these 4 questions that was in one of Audre Lorde's essays, one of her books that she did where she asked 4 questions. And she wrote this when she was going through stages of cancer, when she developed cancer, and she was really focusing on who she was as a queer person. And so she asked things, kind of questions that if you look at it, it's kind of hard to ask, like the one where it says, what words do you not have? And I was thinking about, if you don't really have the words, how can you think of what words that you don't have? But what she was really talking about was what words and ideas do we not have that we need to essentially begin healing. And then so to also move on, I kind of want to just kind of spotlight what we have going on at East Lubbock Art House. So if you don't know, I'm also the director of East Lubbock Art House, and we have our first solo art exhibition coming up of work by Jane Lindsay. So she does daguerreotypes, photographs, installations. So this is one of her pieces, one of her photographs that she did. She does a lot of work with people who have been incarcerated, not so much inmates, but people who have been incarcerated that are incarcerated, because we don't want to dehumanize these people. And within her work, she really focused on this idea of in certain cultures, when certain people do criminal acts and do things that are not so much proper within the community, they don't send them to prisons or jails. Essentially, they would do this thing where the person who committed the crime, everyone in the community that knew them would essentially stand around them out in public, and they would tell the person everything that they did good in their life. So it would be a thing where maybe the whole community would stand around them for maybe hours, days, up to weeks. And so it wasn't so much where people would get thrown into this cage, thrown into solitary, but we would focus on what this person has done and how we can work towards healing. Because a lot of times people, especially in Western culture, they don't recognize that a lot of times when crimes are committed, it's not so much that this is a bad person, but that they have a mental illness or that they need healing as well. And so to go a little bit in my work, I could have put more work, but I have a lot going on. So I wanted to really focus on some poetry that I've been doing and where that's been going. So I started this project last year when COVID had kind of started. I think we started on Easter a little bit is when I got it really spearheaded. So I wrote this book of poetry called Melanated Magic, which really focuses on pain and healing, especially through the Black female perspective. And so we made a Facebook group where it was all Black women, and we discussed different things. Our first question is, what do we see as pain? And we went towards like, what do we see as healing? What are you doing to continue healing in your life? And sometimes I just ask questions of like, how are we doing? Or just different things to just see where people are, especially as the pandemic is going on. And then I also made this sculpture here. So I make a few installations that kind of really focus on healing and what it means to heal, and just like kind of Black ideas of healing. So this piece was inspired by Toni Morrison's book Beloved, and a part of it, and also in the movie, it shows a woman who's kind of like a preacher, priestess, who was essentially out in the woods with a large group of people, and they're just out in the middle of the woods dancing. And they're just all like, you wouldn't think of it as like they're going through this time of like the end of slavery and antebellum era, because of the excitement that they have and the focus that they have towards healing. And so I want to play for you all just a little poem. I wrote a lot of poetry also that focuses on healing. So in my poetry book, Melanated Magic, there's a few poems that all say how to heal, and then they all focus on like a certain perspective. Like some focus on vengeance, some focus on self-love. And so here's a recording. It's not of myself. I recorded this when I did a residency in Los Angeles. So I had a few Black women read the poems and read them in the style that they were if they were the person also writing this. But I also tried to get poems that connected to the person as I learned more about them as well. So here we go.
Last night, I sat 17 hours, have box braids, 3 strands, twisted into my 4C, just to see if I could hang myself from my scalp. My beautician and I tied my hair around my neck and bobby pinned my ends to the ceiling. I never felt so Black, like a no Black card needed. I eat cornbread and collard greens black, like the supremacy noose around my neck, waiting for me to plead, I can't breathe. And the only one that could cut my synthetic umbilical cords was the same woman that tied them together. She bathed me in my tears, covered me in coconut oil, burned sage over my breast, and was muttered hymns about her mother and her mother's mother as she took a toothbrush to my edges. Then she whispered in my ear, the rainbow is enough. As I meditated to Erykah Badu, Bag Lady, I realized ain't nothing serious enough for me to take me.
So yeah, so that's also the woman reading that. Her name is Karen. So I did about 12 other poems with different women that I knew. They read different poems that all kind of related to the work they were doing and just who they are as a person as well. And so this is a little tidbit. So a thing that I really kind of focus on is like the question of what is healing. So in the Facebook group that I did, in accordance with the Melanated Magic, the Healing Circle Facebook group that we did, we asked the question of like, what is healing? So here are a few of the responses. So in the group also, there was a thing where there was no right or wrong answer. So it was kind of open. So whatever people said, it was what people said. We weren't really looking for arguments. We weren't really looking for political correctness or just, you know, textbook answers to the questions that were going on that I was asking. So this was kind of what people saw as what this was. It wasn't like, let me go to Google and look this up, but this was a few of the things. And a lot of people really saw it as like damage of whether it was physical, emotional, mental, spiritual, and just being able to overcome what you're going through. So then I asked myself, what is healing? So I always ask myself this probably like once a month. So for sure, it's a process of making or becoming sound and healthy again. And then a few days ago, I was really thinking about it again. And I really see it as like self-love and self-preservation. And in a way with self-love, it's the process of being able to love yourself and to work towards your own happiness. And then through self-preservation, it's the act of being able to protect yourself, whether that's through self-love and just having, people might say is your guard up, and just protection against yourself. Because I think a lot of times when we try to, work towards healing and work towards betterments of ourselves, we don't really think about, how much do we love ourselves? And a lot of times I'll think about it myself as, I'll protect other people, but I won't have that same protection for myself. So I think if you don't have that, then you can't really work towards healing. And also to go with healing is wellness. And I don't see healing and wellness as the same thing. I see healing as more of a step-by-step process and something that is continued, whereas wellness is something that's continually practiced. And also a lot of times, like many Black communities, it's hard to have this continuous wellness, especially with geographical issues, financial issues, things like that. It's harder to do things that contribute to wellness because you can't stay on this consistent basis if you don't have the financial access, the time to participate in this. So that's where, in a sense, healing comes in, especially within Black communities, and where we have to think of our own ways to essentially heal. And also a thing to think about is who needs healing. I spelled my grandma's name wrong, but it's okay. But a thing to think about with healing, I know a lot of people will, especially in the Black community, they don't think they need healing. It's hard to kind of get people to start the process if they don't really know, that they need to be healed. And a whole sense of it is that everyone needs to be healed, especially with the concept of intergenerational trauma. Whereas, you might not feel this trauma, but it's also coming from the people who have come before you, like our mothers, grandmothers, great-grandmothers. So I like to, think of it as a sense of, if I don't think that I need healing, I think of it that my grandmother might have needed healing. And the stuff that she passed down to me causes me to also need this healing. Especially since my grandma grew up in a time where she was born into Jim Crow, lived through segregation, lived through a time when it was this Black Power movement, and then also lived through working towards having the first Black president of the United States. So it was kind of a time where she saw and thought that, having a Black president or any Black person in the highest form of power in the United States would never happen. And for that, even if you don't like Obama or anything, it was healing for her to see that happen. And I feel like after that was kind of a time when she had this biggest relief off of her shoulders of, all this work that I've been through, all of this that I've been through. Now I'm at this process where I'm at the end of my healing stage. And also when we think of healing and healing processes, especially in the Black community, there's kind of steps that, not so much are good, that are taken into account. So a lot of times then Black communities will ignore pain, especially just brown and Black communities. And there was also, historical things that were written that said like, Black people don't really need healing. They don't need to go to doctors because they don't really experience pain as, their white cohort might experience pain. They can experience higher levels of pain. So there's essentially no reason for them to go to a doctor or go to see someone for mental psychological help. So that's why, things like slavery happened, because it was like, they don't really feel this pain. So this doesn't really impact their lives. And also seeking religions or spiritual guidance, going to churches, just really focusing on religion. There's also concepts, whether good or bad, where it's, we'll pray the pain away. So, if you have a problem, it's not really like a need in the community to go to a physician or to seek any other type of help, because you can just pray it away. And with a lot of my work, I've also been focusing on some traditional and non-traditional forms of healing processes, especially specific to the Black community. And so one of the biggest things that I really focus on is how hair braiding really focuses as a form of healing. And just to tie back to that, is when I kind of learned of when the transatlantic slave trade was happening. There was no access for people to have food on slave ships. So when a lot of the women in the tribes knew that they were going to be put on slave ships, especially their children as well, they would braid their children's hair, and they would also add rice to their children's hair so they would have food to eat. And I also just see hair braiding, the process, the access to just, provide self-love to yourself, or just to, go out and just to sit hours and have your hair braided. It's just so important, and especially with looking back at Jane Lindsay's work, and just also knowing experiences with the incarceration system. I know that with Black women, it can be the hardest for them in these systems because there's no way for you to get your hair done. So the way that your hair is going to be the way that your hair is. So it's, a lot of women that are Black in that system also figure out ways to, have this form of healing as well. Like some of them will use like grape or strawberry jelly to, moisturize their hair. They'll braid each other's hair. And so essentially the people in the incarceration system that are Black braid, they're almost like these healers, root workers, because they have this knowledge and they have this access to providing this form of healing to others. And so I have a few steps, and I won't read the kind of the basis of each one of them. So I did a lot of research on like different steps and what different physicians, different healers, different root workers saw as like these steps for positive healing and a positive healing journey. And so the main one that is most important is being able to name your pain, which is just being able to tell and describe what your pain is. And I know it's very important because if you can't access and tell people the pain and the brokenness that you're going through, it's, you can't really start the healing process until you're ready to. And then I also, it's available on Google, but it's this link, I think it was through this woman created this thing they called Feel Like Shit, where it was like, it's an hour process, like you're supposed to take an hour and you answer these questions. So it's just kind of basic questions. Like the first one starts off, have you eaten a day? And then if you click yes, then it'll keep going on. Well, it asks, have you eaten in the last 4 hours? And then if you say no, then it basically says, well, you should either eat breakfast, lunch, or dinner. And then you keep going on from that and that. And it kind of works a way to just like focus on like what is healing, and how specifically could healing impact your life? So it's a really cool thing. And if you just Google it, it's pretty fun. Somebody took a lot of time to make this whole questionnaire. So I really love it. And then to also talk about art and the access of healing in art. Also at the Art House, we started having art classes. We don't really have many people that take the art classes, but to kind of spotlight one of our artists that participates virtually, Ida Rasa. This is one of her first paintings that she did. And so Ida has been just continuously telling me how this has really helped her, especially during COVID, when she felt like, as a woman of color, like, she was struggling, going through so much, and almost like she was becoming disconnected from, the rest of society. And she just really wanted to, heal from what was going on, and also just learn about art, but she didn't have access to the art because she didn't want to, go back, enroll in college. She didn't want to take classes that were like $20 to $40. So this was a way for her to, heal. And sometimes we'll do like paintings like this, like we'll just work on it on Sundays, but she'll continuously just work on it throughout the week. So it's, seeing through her and through others, especially, we can see that art really benefits. And everyone know that art benefits all individuals, but sometimes it's harder for people of color to get access to things like this because of the way society's set up, especially in America. And I also want to spotlight some other artists that I'm also very much inspired by, and they also make work about healing. So Gail, she lives in Dallas actually, and she creates paintings that have to do with being in this sort of safe space. And all of her paintings and all of her work incorporate plants and horticulture as this a symbol of healing. and being in this sense of regrowth. And then also Jasmine Hayes, she does a lot of work about healing too. So this was part of her installation where she had just a lot of different parts. Like she does sculpture, she does poetry, she does performance, and also drawing. So she wanted to create this safe space as well, like Ari Brielle does, where it was just safe to be a Black woman, where it said, you know, even though we have this pain, we can heal. And then to also focus on some more work that's more community-based. So Lauren Hazley also does, they're a Black woman, and she turned her whole studio into basically a food bank. So I believe it was pre-COVID that she started this, but it got bigger during COVID. So she's turned her whole studio into a food bank where she gave back to her community in Los Angeles. So she saw as, you know, she didn't want to just stand idle to the community that she was in, and especially during the pandemic. And she makes work also as well about healing. So this was kind of her work becoming just three-dimensional in a way. So yeah, and that's all I have. Please go follow these artists. They're all on Instagram.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Daniel. This is wonderful to see the intersections between all these three artists and psychologists. So I'm excited about the workshop you'll be giving about hair braiding, sculpture, collage, and poetry. It's coming up soon. So next thing we gonna do, thank you all the audience staying put. So discussion amongst us. These list of questions these questions are generated by the panelists themselves. So there are some topics that might have touched on briefly. So there are about 5 questions. So,
and Sang-Mi, if I may, if someone in the audience has a question, use the Q&A feature and type your question in, and we'll be reading those as well.
Yes. Okay, that would be great. Q&A. So we don't have anything yet, but I saw Marianne Lawson raising her hand. I don't know whether she had a question that way, but please feel free to type it in the Q&A button in the bottom of your screen, so we can visit that question later. So first question for the panelists was, why is the topic pain important to all of your work and research? That can be related to the sources of pain, pain imposed by power and certain harms done. So that can be beyond not just limited scope.
I'll start us off.
Yeah, great.
But when we're discussing topics like race, it's so easy to quickly categorize ourselves and to separate or filter out people from others. And in doing so, we create a lot of like kind of generalizations that are unhealthy. And pain is something that is universal. It's universally shared. And I think it was Xingyi that said, like, it leads to empathy. And I think that empathy is really is key in healing.
That's why you were focusing on certain parts of pain. Okay, Xingyi, can you add up a little bit to what?
Sure, yeah, I was actually thinking along the very similar line. I think I have been fascinated by pain because of that universality. I think before I was introduced to this whole idea of pain psychology, I think I was thinking, I think naively, like pain is just for some people. Like some people have this like psychological pain or physical pain and others don't. And the more I learn, the more I teach, the more I see clients, the more I work, it's just the more I realize pain is just a universal experience that like all living things have. And I think that universality is what makes pain as a topic very interesting and important to me, I think.
Mm-hmm. Daniel?
Yeah, so I also got this book. I don't know if y'all can see it. It's called Black Pain. So I think I got it about 3 years ago. It's by Terry M. Williams. So I started reading this a while ago when I was just starting to work on like pain and healing. And last year when the protests kind of started is when I kind of stopped focusing so much on pain, because I had a friend that started just talking about how, you know, a lot of white culture, a lot of white people, and just white America loves to see Black pain. And I think that really hit me. And we had a group show about what focused on what happiness was, what Black happiness was, and Black joy. So after that, I kind of stopped working so much on pain, because I saw it as as a sense of like, am I playing into like what people like? Is this why people like my work? Is it not so much that they just like the work, but they just, you know, can really resonate with Black pain? And is that a reason why people, you know, really resonated with the death of George Floyd, and why they don't really care if, you know, a Black person or a person of color is, you know, doing something amazing or doing a big achievement?
Okay, great. So we are moving down the list. How do you define pain? What is your association with pain? To go a little bit further.
If I could interject just to follow up on what Danielle is saying, is I think she hits on something that's important. I think in the context of art, particularly with Black artists, there are many who in agreement that that Black pain is sensationalized. It's like it's attractive, in fact, that's also contributes to the success of some contemporary artists, right? That some people are more interested in seeing the work that deals with pain and suffering, like Kara Walker's work, for instance, versus seeing these like positive contributions or these positive kind of perspectives, or not involving the topic of race at all, right? So, and so I'm glad that you brought that up, Danielle. I think that touches on something else that's like, you know, here, if for Danielle, here you are making decisions or questioning your own creative decision making based on the response or assumed response of others around you that you don't have any control over. But it's also your own, you know, you're looking for some form of way of protecting yourself as well, right? And protecting your creative thinking, right? And so, you know, I think there's a lot there that's like, that we're dealing with here. That's like one, that shows how society creating multiple obstacles for, you know, that you have to filter, you know, that one has to filter through and make decisions and channel through, and yet trying to also be true to yourself.
Related to Althea, your idea about sensationalism, especially by the media attention. So they tend to heighten and highlight certain parts of the pain to draw the audience attention. For instance, in Kara Walker's work, when she gained the attention by using some silhouette cutouts from antebellum South era, then the criticism comes forward as to her consumption of the pain, the historical icons, overly recycled, recycling the pain over and over again. So that's something to be a little bit carefully touched on, and it can be even dangerous by focusing too much on the pain itself. Okay, so the next question, moving on. So how do you define pain, and what is your association with pain in your work?
So I see pain as trauma. So sometimes I don't really focus on pain. I usually like speak on trauma, especially intergenerational trauma, where you know, stuff that either has affected like our predecessors affect us, or it's something that has affected them also affects us. So I kind of think of pain as something that kind of holds us back, that doesn't help towards healing, and just kind of sets us back in a sense.
So that's a kind of point of kind of obstacle in a way. So holding you back to move forward. Okay. So any thoughts on the pain's definition?
For me, pain is, I would say pain is human. As I associate pain with just being human, part of lives, whether it's physical, psychological, emotional, social. So as long as you're born into the world, I feel like it's just part of life. And I don't necessarily think it's, well, I mean, pain, I mean, I was going to say pain is not necessarily a bad thing. It sounds bad, but I feel like it's part of our life. And if you are so opposed to pain, I think that creates suffering. So that sometimes, yeah, I feel like the association between pain and suffering is also important. There are pain, but I think to some extent, suffering could be your choice. But I don't know, for me, pain is just human being, part of life, I think.
I find real fascination in the different types of pain, because I agree. I think there's constructive pain and there's like destructive pain. There's like temporary pain and there's long-term pain. Right. Like one thing I didn't share in my talk, but thought about it, is I'm a mother, and so I feel like I can't separate thinking about a lot of these topics without separating that connection. And there's and one makes, well, it leads me to thinking about labor pain, right? Because it's constructive and it's short term, and it's a good, in a lot of respects, it's a good pain in some ways, right? Because it's doing all the things your body needs to know and tell you to get through the process, right? And so, but then there's that long-term pain, and that's the, I think that's what when we're talking about pain so often, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about this like debilitating, when we're talking about race in particular, you know, that's what we're talking about. Danielle's intergenerational pain, right? Like that pain is, it leaves a much deeper wound.
Yeah, for sure.
That really makes sense. Great. Then moving to a little bit of process moment. So how does healing take place?
Well, I guess I'll start. I feel like healing takes place when people notice that they have pain, or that, you know, they have this brokenness. So a lot of times, like, people won't think that they need healing because they won't think that they're in pain. So I think after like the process that I kind of talked about, it's kind of this step of like telling what your pain is, working towards this, and also having a continuous process. Because a lot of times I'll see it just in life where it was people would go to church because, you know, they'd have something bad happen. And then after a while that they would get over that, they would think, okay, I'm healed. I'm not in pain, where in a sense you still need that healing because it's going to happen again. Something bad's going to happen again. Well, something that you say or assume is bad is going to happen again because you didn't continue the process. It's kind of like how people will take medicine, and once they feel like they don't need to take like a pill anymore, and then they'll just stop. So, and then it's gotten worse.
And it's also related to the system one can't really have a whole control of, right? So that can be a perpetuating pain no matter what. The small short time is gone, but it comes back and again and again. And that is so related to This Is Fine, that meme, because it is so oblivious. There's fire going on and all the disasters going on, but one can contemplate nothing's happening, or it'll be okay.
As long as you have toilet paper.
Right? That's a newer version. So that relates to the kind of acknowledging the pain's existence. Or some people may think you're not hurt, you're not in pain. But Daniel touched on why do you still think healing is necessary? Healing is for everyone. Can you talk a little bit further about that?
Yeah, and I was kind of also just thinking of like how do people think that they need healing? So it's kind of like something where you just do it and everybody does it. So it's, you know, even if you don't think you need healing, there's you just participate in it. It's kind of like how the protests happened, and how protesting, whether it's like that in-person protesting or just an objection with wrongdoing, even though you don't think that you need that healing, it's important that you also just participate in it so you're comfortable with it. It's like getting toilet paper before you have to actually need it, because when you need it. It's not the good time to go and get it.
Right. So, Shinye, based on your clinical experience, do you have any experience to be shared as to some patients not acknowledging their existing pain?
Yeah, I think I don't think it's yes. I think it's just not patients, but I think everybody to some extent. It's hard to acknowledge their own pain. So I think that's why I was thinking, like, when you ask like how does healing take place, I feel like healing has so many different forms and it exists and it takes many places. You know, it exists in different levels. So because so many people, including patients or non-patients, because it's so hard to acknowledge pain, because it's painful. It's hard to see your pain because it's painful. You want to avoid it, you want to shy away from it. So I think the core thing that has to happen is you really have to see your own sense of otherness, like where you feel really othered with whatever form it is. It could be psychotherapy, it could be activism, it could be art, it could be music, meditation, exercise. And I think the key is to really connect with the alienated part, like a pain, where that's stemming from within you. And I think once you don't shy away from your own otherness, I think you have better capacity to connect with someone else's pain. So this is where I see both in clinical work and my teaching, where we focus a lot on multiculturalism. We talk a lot about race, ethnicity, you know, social pain, all those that. And what often happens in those kind of a multicultural class is people engage in this suffering Olympic. So for example, like, you know, Black people say, oh, you know, my color is so dark, like, you know, I have the what is it like? I have the most pain. And some people with poverty, they say, no, like, you know, I am coming from a, you know, very poor family and that pain is greater. So basically what I'm saying is people tend to engage in this pain suffering Olympic. And I don't think that's fruitful. And I think the reason why that's happening so much in our society, not just in our class or whatever, I also engage in those too, you know, believe me, ask my husband, right? So I think the reason why that happens is that because we are not connected with our own alienated self, and that creates further suffering because you don't feel understood, because you don't want to look at yourself, you don't want to see your pain, and you don't feel understood by other people, and you just get defensive and say, you know, I have more pain than you do, and I think that creates suffering. So I think the really key is to get in touch with your own sense of pain and otherness. And I think that probably is going to help a lot about a lot of those empathy towards other people's pain because they're connected. So I think Sang-mi, you were saying, like, if you're not hurt, why do you think healing is necessary? Why is it for everyone? My thinking is there's a favorite quote, Martin Luther King Jr. said, like, what is it? Whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. So I don't believe in like, I'm in pain and you're not in pain. If Daniel is in pain, in any way, it's gonna affect me, you know? So I think that kind of interconnectiveness is so important. And because of that, I think healing is necessary and is for everyone. Yeah.
Okay, great, thank you. It was appalling to hear you saying that the counseling and medical treatments patients are receiving from medical professionals, it differed from ethnic minority or non-English spoken minorities and Black community. They were subject to more alleviated treatments or no treatment because of their misunderstanding and certain biases towards the ethnic and racial groups. So empathy, talking about empathy, you said your access to the patients, finding the empathy was a lot easier because you are a part of ethnic minority. Then would that there be some additional kind of ways we can really venture further empathy in all kinds of races, whether they're African Americans or Asian Americans and so forth?
Yeah, I wouldn't say that I was able to extend my empathy because I'm an ethnic minority. No, I do not believe in that. What I believe what happened was that I think I was getting in touch with my own otherness. So at that time, when I was seeing the clients, my sense of otherness was being a foreign national. Like I was not born and raised here. I came here in my mid-20s. So I always carry this feeling of otherness in my life, career or personal life in the US. So I think me getting in touch with my own sense of otherness, I think that helped me to extend the empathy towards other people's pain and otherness. So no, I don't think it has to do with my, I think, well, I mean, it does in a way, but I think even if I'm not Asian, for example, ethnic minority, even if I'm white, for example, everybody, in my opinion, has their own sense of otherness. So if we are in touch with our own otherness, I think that can create a very powerful place where empathy can be extended.
Yeah, thank you for clarifying. So touching on your own sense of otherness, whether you're white, Black, or Asians, whatsoever. Okay, Joe was prompting. There are several questions in the chat Q&A box as well. So let's finish our questionnaire for our discussion first and move on. So how do you respond to this old proverb? I guess this was raised by me: no pain, no gain. For instance, artists must suffer in order to succeed. So there's that kind of a labor pain Althea talked about. That was a productive pain, right? So is it a necessary evil that we have to carry on?
Oh yeah, I think I think there is some truth into that. Not that suffering is a must that people will have, but I view it more from like an yin-yang perspective, where we need to appreciate both like positive and negatives. Like I think we have a tendency, especially in a Western society, where we just want to only hold on to the positives and want more of them, and that creates suffering. And when negatives are also part of our lives and it's all around us. So speaking of art, like even though I'm far from arts in my life, I believe that you cannot fully appreciate like the bright color like white if you don't have a dark color like black. So you appreciate sunrise not when you had like abundance of sun, but when you were in dark. So I think you can truly appreciate positive emotion when you also experience fully and deeply the meaning of negative emotion, and vice versa. So I think holding only onto the positives can create suffering and pain. And I think that when it comes to no pain and no gain, again, not the pain and suffering is a must. I think it's just, I feel like to some extent we need to normalize that is just part of life in order for us to feel something really joyful and positive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great comment. You're an expert in composition, by the way. Black and white to contrast and positive, negative space. Okay, great. So we are gonna move on to the Q&A. So you all have an access to the text. So I'm gonna just read from the top. So, Olivia Richardson, I know her. So she had a question. So exploitation, capitalization of Black pain seems to always be brought up when Black artists discuss their lives. Do you think this falls under toxic positivity, or do you think there is a genuine concern? This relates to Black magic.
Do you want to answer that, Althea?
Oh, good. I was wondering the same thing. Do you want to answer it first? Go ahead. Go ahead. We'll answer it differently, I'm sure.
No, you can go.
I just think, it's good actually to have some time to like process this question, because because there's a lot of different components to it. I think there's, I think the reason that, well, I was going to say it's complex, right? I think the reason that it continues to come up or continues to be discussed is because, like we're talking about pain, it's not yet healed. I mean, in some ways, as we were discussing pain, in some ways, I don't know if it's okay to say that I don't really believe in healing. I mean, I believe that we need healing, but I think it's much harder to heal than the way sometimes we talk about it. Or maybe I'm just being a pessimist, and I tend to be sometimes. So So excuse if that's the case. But yeah, I think that the reason why, you know, there continues to be this, I think it is a genuine concern. And I think the reason it continues to come up in Black artists' work and discussing their lives is because it feels relevant, because it is relevant. You know, I will say, like it was mentioned earlier, I studied, in my undergraduate study, I studied at Spelman College. So Spelman College is a historically Black all women's college. So it's a unique, rarefied time in my life where I was a majority, right? And I could easily like disappear and not be recognized or noticed. And you know, and that's where I started being an art student. And when I was an art student there, I didn't make any work about race. Race wasn't my work wasn't about that. I'm not to say that it couldn't have been, but it's, I think in part, it was a product of my environment because there wasn't enough impacting my life in that aspect to be something that was on my mind constantly. So other things filled my head and I made work about other things. And so I guess I'm saying that as like evidence to, it's a product of any marginalized community. But yeah, whether or not it's like toxic and positive, I don't know that it's toxic. I think it's about a matter of like perspective. I don't think it's toxic. I think for artists, it's a way of working through learning. For me, at least, it's a way of working through concerns, exploring and learning about oneself, really. And everyone does that.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Daniel?
Yeah, so I guess to go back to what you said, Althea, I believe in healing, but I don't believe in like it'll be something where you'll ever be whole. So it's kind of something that you continuously kind of go through. Because I think that's the biggest misconception, that people will think, oh, I'll go to a therapist like for a year and then after that I'll be good. But I understand that people, you know, with financial issues, access, it's, you know, that's something that people might have to say and, you know, give this idea of that I'm essentially like healed when they're not. It's just that they can't afford to have access to this. But I think it can be toxic that some people will kind of focus on Black pain, especially in their work. You know, I guess it's something that people see more. I think when I was in college too, that a lot of other Black people that didn't make work that was about Black pain or about slavery, that sometimes like our professors would kind of like ask questions or critique the work and, you know, ask, why doesn't this, you know, talk about who you are or what you do. I remember I did a residency too, where another friend that I had that's Latinx, we had like these mentors / curators that came in, and she was talking about our work, which was, she did prints, and it was mostly focusing on this guy who was character that she made up, who was a mailman, and he would kind of people watch. And then so that curator asked her a question, so why don't you make work about what's going on, or why don't you make work about who you are? Because essentially they found it funny that as a woman of color that she didn't make work about who she was. And I've had other, you know, artists that are women of color where people will ask that, well, why don't you make work about, you know, who you are, what's going on, your pain. So I essentially think it's sometimes like it's genuine, especially artists who don't make a lot of money, if they make it about pain and healing, that it's something that they're connected to. But a lot of times some artists will make it about pain so they can just make money and get recognized. Like it's easier to sell a piece about, you know, the death of Breonna Taylor or George Floyd than it is to make like an abstract painting and sell that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, honestly, I share some experience with that, going through some graduate school experience. So there's a certain kind of social cultural pressure, expectations given to different races and ethnic minorities as well, that you have to represent their own kind. So in order to be recognized. So that kind of outside of otherness and mainstream, outside of the mainstream thing, that is really prevalent. So that's one of the things we should acknowledge. Okay, so that hope that answered.
I was just going to say speak to that. I think that I think one of the challenges is that in general, as a society, we have difficulty separating, seeing individuality as anything other than political. And so simply being who you are, Sang-mi, right? The assumption, yes, of course, that you're making work in response to you because you are in essence the political subject, right? So you're, and it's a luxury or a privilege afforded to those that don't, that those connotations aren't so quickly placed upon them. But, yeah, I'm so glad that actually that was brought up, because I do think a lot of, I'm just thinking from a student perspective, a lot of students struggle with that. And I think even without recognizing that, those of us as instructors or in that role of being critical make the same assumptions even without realizing that, or interpret with the same assumptions of race or identity, when really we need to reflect on that.
Yeah, thank you for that question, Olivia. Nice to see you here. Next question, how important is naming the pain, by Joe Conester?
I guess I should answer that. I think it's the most important step. I mean, to kind of go back on it, I mean, even if you don't talk about what pain you have, I just still think process of healing and wellness, if we just kind of focus on that. And because I think if I wouldn't have been an artist, I also wouldn't have been able to kind of focus on what pain is or to access it. So I think just having the process of, starting with what is your pain, kind of when people will go to a therapist, or you'll see it in a movie where they'll ask you, the therapist will ask the person, so why are you here? So it's kind of the first question that we kind of have to ask ourselves. Because if we don't work from there, it's, I don't know how we can lead towards healing if we can't, figure out what pain is and how it affects us.
Yeah, it's an important step for healing process. Okay, thank you, Joe. Next question, Maya Tutiba, one of our faculty. So as you also demonstrated, pain is amplified or felt more acutely in marginalized groups and communities, racial and ethnic minorities, LGBTQIA, and displaced minorities, immigrants, particularly illegal immigrants, poor communities, etc. The current pandemic intensifies the social injustice and pain that these communities suffer even further due to their social, racial, ethnic prejudice and bias. Have you thought more about the relations between current pandemic and the historically or socially induced pain, displacement, injustice? What is a social remedy for the problem beyond individual healing? In your view, in case you can comment on this from an artistic or clinical perspective, if you can.
Yeah, I was thinking, I think we do tend to perhaps over-focus on the individual level. I mean, I'm guilty of that too. But I think when I think about this question, I feel like because we are so interconnected with each other, it has to happen at the group level. And I think one way that can happen is talking about it, talk about our own pain, everybody. So in the context of race and ethnicity, all those kind of social pain, I think we should be able to talk about it, although it's very uncomfortable. The topic of race and all those things are not a kind of topic that people love. It doesn't make people very comfortable. But I think talking about it at a group level, trying to understand the other person's perspective, all those group level process, I think is necessary for the social, social remedy, not the individual healing.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so that's a great insight from you. Anybody else?
I would just echo the connection part of that, because that's why the pandemic has intensified these problems that we've always had, is that so many are alone, facing the same problems, but alone in doing so.
Isolation really heightened the sense of problems. So yeah, you may not have all the answers. Daniel, do you have anything?
Yeah, I think what they said is so correct, but I think also thinking about the pandemic and COVID-19, it's kind of like we were already in a pandemic, especially as like people of color. It was just kind of like COVID-19 ripped the Band-Aid off. And so like people saw like, oh, I guess this was actually true. Like people of color are dying faster and they don't have access to, you know, medical assistance and now like the COVID-19 vaccine as much as they should have access to it. But I just, you know, it's something that was going on and I believe the pandemic just kind of, you know, enforced it. And then people were at home, they were able to see what's going on. Because a lot of times I think about when George Floyd died, just to go back to that, we were still in a pandemic. So it was, you know, also watching that video, it was kind of before there was like the mask mandate, but it was like, we're supposed to be social distancing and there was no social distancing. So it just kind of, you know, the other pandemic that was going on before kind of just succeeded the COVID-19 pandemic.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is very difficult to navigate between the two. Okay, thank you, Maya. Hope that answered your question a bit. Okay, Rena Little, another colleague of ours, work arising from what has been called difficult knowledge, in this case, pain and trauma, requires a tenderness and sensitivity on the one hand, and the fierce passion and compassion on the other hand, in order to make space and time for the knowledge, and by implication, in the lives of those who look to shape and dignity experiences. How does your work create this balance and not have people relieve pain and or trauma?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think it's relevant to the field of psychology and training psychologists, psychotherapists, because there's this called like a vicarious trauma, right? Like by treating people with pain, you also have that vicarious pain. The first thing that I was thinking is, you have to deal with your own pain. You need to process your own pain. And I think that's why some people believe that therapists, psychologists in training should receive their own treatment so that they view their pain, they know what triggers are, and they know where their otherness is coming from. And by examining your own pain and understanding your pain and processing your pain and healing your pain, I think that probably prevents some of those vicarious pain, I believe. So it starts from you, I think. It has to start from myself. Yeah.
You have to initiate. Okay. Anybody else? Althea?
I don't think it's hard for me to answer. I love that question. And I think it's a really insightful question. But I think in my own work, I'm not responding, thinking about so much the larger picture around me as much as I am questioning and learning through my own personal experience. And so the intention isn't there to, I guess, address the bigger challenges, right? Like, not that maybe it should be, but that's not the first intention, right? And so, yeah, so, you know, the sensitivity that Rena's talking about and the passion that she's talking about, you know, I identify it with the creative practice, like a personal practice, right? And like, and so it's, that balance is about like how, for me is like, how do I handle balancing, like through difficult knowledge, right? Or like, as opposed to others. So I don't know if that's like really addresses the question as much as like, it's a continued struggle, right? It's a continued endeavor.
Mm-hmm. Also,
to find balance.
A main part of your work kind of resides in the in-betweenness, not as fierce as that, not as relieved as that. So it's a kind of ongoing balance. It wasn't really intentional, but ongoing balance between the two. Okay, Daniel, anything?
Yeah, I guess to kind of focus on that, I guess to kind of keep that balance and just when I'm making work, sometimes I try not to think as, I mean, even though I'm Black and a person of color, I try to not to think of my work and the people that I make work about as them being test subjects. I think a lot of times people will just use like, you know, Black people in their work as an inspiration or a test subject, just some like part to make their work advance. And I mean, I saw that when, you know, outside of art, when it was the protests and people just used Black people to kind of advance the work that they were doing. And it wasn't really, you know, they might have been a little well-meaning and cared about this to people, but it was just to advance their work. So it kind of makes this pain that they're experiencing and the work that people are trying to do to focus on that. It's just kind of like, you know, ripping the Band-Aid off and messing with their wound and then, you know, putting the Band-Aid back on kind of thing.
Yeah, that's significant. Okay, thank you. Rina, I hope that answered your question or part of your question. So I'm trying to be sensitive. We have 3 minutes left, and Justice has this question about whether the reception of your work or perception of your work has changed over the last year. I assume that is referring to BLM movement or pandemic. So this is Althea and Daniel question, or Shinya, if you have any insights.
Yeah, do you want to go first, or why don't you go first?
Yeah, I'll just say no. That's it. No.
No?
I would say yes, in that it's changed. I don't know. I mean, I don't really honestly know, but I'd like to think that what I've seen is a desire to an added sensitivity and a desire to know, definitely, and so, or to understand in a different way with more sensitivity. I think that's a great question, because I had to think about it myself. I'm like, oh, I don't know.
I want to add that superficially, the number of exhibitions featuring Black artists has grown immensely over time, whether it's online or physical. But I wonder how long this is going to continue. So that is my own.
Yeah, well, into the question of like, has it changed things? Yes, definitely. But changed perceptions, I'm not entirely sure. I do see more effort, I think. Yeah, I guess it's yet to be, we can't determine that yet. It's too soon, right?
Yeah, like going back to Shinya's question, you have to kind of touch the sense of otherness inside in order to fully have that empathy, right? Okay, so Joe Conester, thank you, Justice. Would you comment on the recent primary? This is related to pain and healing, whether Harry and Meghan, that kind of a media exposure was a productive way to deal with their pain.
Oh, yes, I want to comment on it. I haven't watched the interview, but I was talking with my mom about it. And I've seen a lot of things on Facebook where some people are like, they sympathize with Meghan Markle, and other people, like, they don't really sympathize with it. Like, one friend I had was like, well, what happened to y'all's Black queen? And it was just kind of a joke of like, like, she wasn't as strong as people assume that she is. But it was kind of this thought with my mom of like, also this idea of like whose pain is like weighs more than anyone else's pain, since, Meghan Markle, she has money, she can, afford to go to any therapist. And they're also doing the interview in this like beautiful garden. So it's, even though she had this miscarriage, and there's other women that have had miscarriages, but didn't have access to the financial wealth that she's had, and also aren't as white passing as Meghan Markle, and also aren't, at the, weight level or the size that, is most appealing in America, in any country. So it was kind of, I think coming from that was like, well, how do we like weigh pain? Like, whose pain is worse than anyone else's pain? Is there like a scale, or does there need to be a scale developed where we can say like, Meghan Markle shouldn't, we shouldn't really care about what happened to her, but, other people who have gone through this, we should actually care about them.
Yeah, different weights to be carried, not just because of their social class and privilege.
One
the gaps in between.
Yeah,
Yes.
one just comment. I didn't watch the thing, but I know of the story, and I feel like there are always two sides of the story. And I think that what we often do is, you know, like, Sangmi, you are wrong, and me, Shinye, is right. I think we tend to engage in this diet where somebody's right, somebody's wrong, somebody's more guilty, blah, blah, blah. But like, it's hard for us to engage in like, what am I contributing to the diet? Like, you know, yeah, sure, Sangmi is wrong, but like, we are two people and we are interacting with each other. That means I am contributing to this diet, even though Sangmi is not right. So I think the ability to think about this, what is my contribution to anything, is missing often in our life. And I think I don't know what to do with it. I need to develop that skill more, you know. So yeah, I just wanted to mention that.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Joe Conester, for question. We have one last, we are a little over time, but let's answer Jerry's Boyd. She's one of the graduate students in painting. So do you have any comment on the performative activism during the protest, from big corporations to individuals? Can you understand the question, what that is? Okay.
Yeah, I think just to start it off, I think that in some ways, maybe we touched on some of this, because I have this like skepticism a bit about, I am wondering, you know, you see a lot of quick reactions from corporations and individuals, and you just wonder how much of it, all things that hit quickly like this become fad, and how long is it going to last? You know, and also, you know, into what end, like what purpose does it serve? And so often, you know, the reason that these corporations are making these moves and doing these like kind of visible moves is because it's all gain for them. You know, maybe the intention there is to help and to reach out, but I mean, but there's also, they're also gaining from it as well. And so, yeah, but skeptical.
It's also for their protection, right?
Mm-hmm.
Legal protection. Okay, anything else?
Okay. Yeah, I think I can speak on like the performative part of activism, where it kind of displays of like the public displays of protest. And then I had a friend that kind of brought it up before I even thought about it, that said that there was like the idea and also the notion that's really important, that a lot of the chants that people are doing, that like Black Lives Matter, and especially ones that say like, I can't breathe and get your knee off my neck, that it wasn't so appropriate for, you know, white individuals to say, because it's kind of like, no one's knee is on your neck. So it was, you know, a place where it was like, there was things where, you know, it was only appropriate for Black people to say, like, you know, there was other statements that, you know, people could say that was kind of reaching to Black people and white people and any culture, like Black Lives Matter, where as saying like, you know, I can't breathe wasn't really appropriate, because it, you know, we understood what it meant, but it was also kind of like, it didn't really resonate with the majority of the people that were standing outside chanting.
Yeah, so we have that lens, watching how that's gonna profit the individuals or the corporate through their political gain or profitable monetary gain and so forth. So thank you, Jerry's, for the question. So now we answered all the Q&A. I was curious whether, Shinye, you can share some community resources available for any psychological counseling?
Oh yeah, sure, definitely. Yeah, I can. Oh, right now?
If you have resources, you can kind of direct us where to look at, or if you can share some website.
Out right now, or should I send the like document?
Can you just briefly touch on that if you know?
Sure, yeah, in Lubbock, in psychology department, we have a psychology clinic. So we serve communities here. We also have university counseling centers for students. Those two are the main resources that I am involved in as a faculty. There are different resources. I do have like a document with all those resources, which I can share to people later. Yeah.
Okay, so really appreciate all of you, all the participants and panelists and Joe Arredondo, who made this space really bright today. So hope we can continue this discussion, and thank you so much for this opportunity given to this panel the School of Art and Race and Social Justice speaker series. And thank you. So I guess that's all we have, Joe. All right, so we'll end here, and I'll talk to you guys, panels, and some of the participants later. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you all for coming.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.